LEGO hasn't brought out any Zelda minifigures yet. Hopefully we get some with the upcoming Deku Tree. And LEGO doesn't do us dirty like they did with the Mario sets. What are they? I made my own sculpted minifigure and I hope that LEGO does something similar. Let's check out how I made this awesome little dude. I've been making customs using Procreate epoxy putty. You mix equal parts of each tube and it hardens on its own with no baking necessary. I started with Majora's mask. It's basically a heart shape, so I started to mold that. I wanted the mask to be interchangeable between minifigures, so I decided the best way was probably to attach it to a bandana piece. Next, I wanted to add the spikes around the outside of the mask. I rolled some putty, flattened it out, and then cut little triangles to make spikes. I put the 2 spikes up on top, then added 2 eyes, and attempted to put the 8 spikes at the bottom before realizing that they weren't going to stick. It's the next day, and it's all hardened up. The bandana didn't stay on, and it's super ugly. I didn't like any of it, so I pried off the eyes and the top spikes. I added a layer of fresh putty to the whole thing, and some extra around the edges to attach the spikes. I attached the new eyes, this time a little farther apart, and everything looks much better. Next, I wanted to make the Skull Kid's hat. I'm starting with one of those old school baseball caps. I know it's vintage, but it's all chewed up by some little kid, so no worries there. I cut off the visor with my broken X-Acto knife, and then I sanded the edges smooth. Now it fits on the head along with the mask. I mixed some more putty up, flattened it out, and cut some strips to start adding that flared brim. Next is that tuft up on top. This was tricky to get to stay up there and look nice. I tried adding some heat with my lighter. Bad idea. It basically starts to melt the putty. I let it harden for a little while and I held it upside down so it could hold its shape. This is eventually what I ended up with after a few attempts. Next was the torso. I wanted to start with an orange one so I wouldn't have to paint the side where the arms might scratch off the paint. I lightly sanded the front and back of the torso to get rid of the print and for some extra grip for the putty. I'm making the Skull Kid's neck thing, whatever it's called, out of putty so it's slightly raised off of the torso. I once again flattened down some putty and cut it into some strips. I added them around his neck to give it that frayed look. I made sure to remove some putty from up high so there would be enough clearance for the mask. The Skull Kid has some ruffled sleeves. I added some clay to his arms and ruffled it up with the backside of my knife. Next were his pointy elf-looking shoes. I added some clay to his toes and slowly formed them into 2 different points. I tried to keep it compact but still give it the necessary shape. I also made a little ocarina that I attached to the round stud with a bar piece so that it could be held by a minifigure hand. And here it is all together after a night of hardening up. I wanted to strengthen the Skull Kid's hat, so I started by adding a bead of putty to the underside. I made it thicker, filled in the gaps, and smoothed it out. Now it shouldn't break. The next day, I went to the in-laws' house, said I wouldn't get paint on their table. I did, wiped it off. Don't think they'll notice unless they watch this. I base coated them, drank some Blue Moon, and got the basic color scheme done while I was over there. The next day at home, I started to add the details with a pushpin as my paintbrush. I then glued my bandana into the bandana-shaped dent on the back that I formed earlier. It's tedious work trying to get these small details done by hand, but I'm pretty happy with how this mask turned out. I painted some more details on the legs, like those buckle things on the elf shoes. I then tried to get that ringed belt around the front of the torso painted on there. Oh yeah, and I had to put those rings on his hat too. Tiny little details. I painted his weird lipped face on a brown head too. I don't know where that footage went. But later on, I decided to add some clear coat to him. I used a can of spray paint, but sprayed it on a paper plate and then brushed it on. Let's check him out in his final form. The Skull Kid, standing in a stump in the Lost Woods, playing his flute. I'm pretty happy with how he turned out. I'm excited to build him a nice mock and to make him some minifigure friends. Who should I make? Zelda? Link? Deku Link? If you're watching this video within the first 2 days of posting, then there's still time to enter my minifigure giveaway. Go watch that video now for a chance to enter. You are awesome. Thank you for watching. I am out.